Hello! Today I'd like to show you how I make beef stew in my Instant Pot. Now this is a recipe I've been using for at least 30, probably more like 40 years. Originally I used a crock pot because that's what I had, but once I got an Instant Pot I converted the recipe over and I've never looked back since. This makes delicious, tender beef stew and in a fraction of the time of a crock pot. I love the results every single time, and I think you will too. So let's get started. Of course, we start with beef stew meat. I also use beef broth, some V8 vegetable juice. For vegetables, I use carrots and onion and some potatoes. I season with a little Worcester sauce, as well as a bay leaf, some thyme, and marjoram and garlic powder. Now, the beef stew meat, I end up always cutting it into smaller pieces. For some reason, all the grocery stores like to give you these gigantic pieces of meat, and I want them to be a little bit closer to bite size. So I try for, at least one of the directions to be around an inch in thickness. It helps it cook. And I just like nicer size pieces, I guess. So anyway, it's a quick thing you can do just to make this a little bit nicer, in my opinion. And once I've got those cut up, I'll put these back in a bowl to set aside. And a smart person would have actually started with the vegetables, because now I have meat juice all over my cutting board. And so I switched to a cleaner one to cut up my vegetables. So don't do like I did. Anyway, now I'm going to cut up the vegetables, and I start with the carrots. I only use a couple of carrots. Again, personal preference. I could actually almost use all vegetables, but of course this is a beef stew, so the beef eaters in my household will complain if it's more vegetables than beef. Because carrots are such a hard root vegetable, I do try to keep the pieces on the smaller side, and when they're really one of those thick ends, I'll slice them and also cut them in half a little bit, just to make sure they truly cook to a nice tender texture. With the potatoes, I also cut these into something close to a bite-sized piece. Now I'm using red skin potatoes here. This is just a personal thing that I like to avoid, having to peel potatoes whenever possible. But russets work just fine. I've used russets many times in this recipe. Just peel them and then also cut them into smaller pieces. Of course, if you use red skin potatoes like I do, you will have skins in your stew. I don't mind this. Some people might. So, like I said, this is entirely your own personal choice, whatever you like. And then with the onion, I'm also cutting this into about the same size pieces. This is not one of those soups where you have to mince everything and it's tiny little pieces that you want to have kind of disappear into the broth. This stew is big chunks, big hearty chunks, I should say, of your veggies and your meat. So once this is all cut up, we can get started on cooking. I start with the Instant Pot on the saute setting. Heat up some oil, and then we're going to start by browning the meat. Just toss the meat in there. And what you're going to do is add the meat, kind of let it brown for a minute, and then stir it some, and then you'll let it sit for another minute, and just give it a chance to brown all the way around. This takes in total from about 5 to 7 minutes. And as you can see, there's still some pink here, but it's definitely browning. And It'll take a little longer if you have more meat, obviously, but eventually it will happen. It just takes a little bit of time. And like I say, there's a lot of sides to the meat, so you want to stir it and give it a chance to give that saute function a chance to come in contact with all the sides of your meat. And also notice I do leave all the liquid in here. It does add to the flavor of the stew. But now we'll add the rest of our ingredients. Of course, all those lovely cut up vegetables that we made, as well as some more liquid. We'll start with the beef broth. And the spices. Don't forget the bay leaf, of course. We need a little bit of Worcester sauce. And of course, then the magic ingredient, this is what I call it anyway, is some V8 vegetable juice. Now, I buy V8 in a 6-pack of 12-ounce cans. I think I'll be lost if I ever have trouble finding this at the grocery store, because I buy these, I have these on stock all the time, because I make this stew and another stew, soup actually, during the winter. And it's such a convenient way to be able to add this. You can use tomato juice though, if that's what you prefer to stock. But once you have this all added in, I don't know why I'm stirring it. You really don't need to. You just cover and seal your Instant Pot. On my Instant Pot, the setting is the meat and stew setting. It's basically high pressure for 18 minutes. Then you're gonna let that go. Of course, it needs about 20 minutes to come up to pressure, 18 minutes for the cycle. And then I let it sit for another at least 20 minutes to decompress or depressurize at the end of the cycle. But during that time, I do make my thickening agent, which is a simple slurry of all-purpose flour and water. You can see I'm using a coffee cup. You know, you don't have to do anything fancy with it. Just mix it together in your cup. While the Instant Pot is cooking, you know, this is going to take at least 30 to 40 minutes. This might settle out a little bit, but that's okay. You just give it another quick stir when you need it. Now the Instant Pot cycle is done. I've let it depressurize. I release the rest of the pressure, and I can remove my lid, and you can see this stew is bubbling, cooked through, and ready to finish. I'm giving this a stir, and when I do so, you can see that these potatoes, as I described, are kind of starting to crumble a little bit. For me, this is the perfect texture. That's when I know that my carrots are cooked, my meat is cooked through. You even see a little bit of the meat falling apart a little bit. I know it's tender, and it's going to be absolutely delicious. You also might think I'm doing an awful lot of stirring here. In reality, that's because I'm looking for the bay leaf and I can't seem to find it. So I'll just leave that for now as I get ready to add in my flour mixture. You can see, nothing fancy here, just dumping this in. And because the Instant Pot is on the keep warm setting, it's still bubbling, so that will instantly activate that flour and it will start to thicken the stew, which you can see right away. And as I stir, now finally the bay leaf will show itself. It must have been kind of hugging along the side of the Instant Pot, but now I can get that out of there and resolve that outstanding issue. And now the stew is all set and ready to serve. You can see that the liquid is not super thick like a gravy. I'm going for a texture that's more like a thickened soup, but not super duper thick. So if you want it thicker, just double up on the amount of the flour slurry, and it should get to where you want it to be. But for me, this is exactly what I want. And I consider this ready to go. I really hope you give this beef stew a try. It's satisfying, it's delicious, it warms you on a cold day, and if you try it, I know you'll love it. Enjoy.